各位贵宾，会议现在开始。The meeting will now continue. Mr. Dorg, the floor is yours.
Good morning again. As I said, 10 minutes always turns into 15. But we are back in business, and we continue with our dialogue with the representatives of the government of the Republic of China, Taiwan, and we are now opening the floor for questions by members of the committee on Cluster 3. As I said, a very important number of articles on non-discrimination, on the role of the best interests of the child, the right to life, survival, and development, and the right of the child to express her or his views. And Mrs. Lundy has the floor.
Okay. So I'm going to ask some questions on each of the 4 general principles. Many of these issues will come up later on because they are cross-cutting, but I just have a small number of specific questions. The first question is on Article 2 of the Convention, the non-discrimination. And my question is around stateless children, children who are considered to be stateless. And I would just like a very simple answer to the question, what services or other benefits are there that stateless children are not entitled to? So what is it that stateless children may not receive that other children receive, if anything? Second question relates to children with disabilities, and I had a question about how many children with disabilities are either educated or reside in special institutions. And as a sub-question to that, concern has been expressed about higher levels of abuse of children with disabilities in institutions. And again, I'd be grateful for some statistics on that. My general question on non-discrimination relates to data collection, because of course it's incredibly important when you want to identify discrimination to be collecting data disaggregated with the correct categories. A lot of the data that we've seen gives us information on gender and on location of the child, but we haven't seen a lot of data broken down by the child's ethnic background, or by sexual orientation, or by disability. And I was wondering in particular, and this is moving on to Article 6, life, survival, and development. We have statistics for mortality rates and suicide rate of children provided by gender and location. And we'd be interested in the statistics broken down. For instance, an issue has been raised about suicide rate in LGBT children. So again, is that data collected, and what are those statistics looking like? In terms of Article 3, we received information that Article 3 is in many parts of legislation, which is a very good thing, that it's incorporated in law, and I'm sure your review will ensure that Article 3, the best interest principle, is in all aspects of law affecting children. My question is a concern about how the best interest principle is understood in Taiwan, and I wonder, is there an official position or guidance on it? When I read the answers to the list of issues, and when I heard the response this morning about 18 and 19-year-olds, it seemed to me that best interest principle was being equated with protection. And the best interest principle is not just about protection. The Committee on the Rights of the Child has been clear that it should not be used as an excuse for paternalism to override children's wishes. And in fact, the best interest principle, we cannot decide that without actually talking to children and hearing their views. So I have an interest just generally, what is the guidance on that, and how are adults, decision makers, trained on the best interest principle? And then finally, in relation to Article 12, the child's right to have their views given due weight. So this has become quite a significant issue in the reports from the NGOs and in our meeting with children yesterday. Many people were talking about the idea of a mindset, and a mindset that really doesn't see children as competent and capable decision makers in their own right. So you can have obligations in law to say that children's views must be collected, and you can set up institutional structures like school councils. But clearly they're not going to work unless there is a mindset that is respectful of children's capacity and children's ability to give informed opinions on their own lives. So the question, it's also a training question, not on the convention generally, but very specifically in what Professor Doak was talking about earlier about the concept of children and what is done to promote a notion amongst teachers, social workers, judges, parents, about the idea that the child has an independent, self-determining subject of rights. I think I'm going to leave it there. That's going to be enough. That's enough. Yeah.
Yeah. Mrs. Carr. Don't forget your microphone.
I would like to raise the question of supposed discrimination between children in the cities and children living in remote areas, rural areas. Discrimination with regard to budgets, allocation in the field of education, in the field of health, in the field of parental teaching, and also the question of discrimination on ethnic origin. Now, about hearing the opinion of the child, I would like to point at the problem that children in the education children field do not feel that their opinions is heard, because on the committees deciding on punishment, the ratio of students from the government students organization, there is not heard, or they are not related to. And the question is, how can we make them feel that they are heard at school when they feel that they are censored in their newsletters or in their publications? And I would like to go back to the best interest of the child with regard to the ages. Is it, in my opinion, I found that if a child is between the age of 18 and 20 is married, then he is considered capable of participating in legal and administrative. Is it the best interest of the child to get married at the age of 18 in order to be capable to participate in proceedings that relate to property only? I wonder what is the views with regard to this. And I wonder also if judges are trained to understand the best interest of the child and how to make a dialogue with the child that appears before them in order to hear their opinions. Thank you.
Thank you. Just a short one. Yeah? Okay, go ahead. Yes, I just have a short question on the concept itself of the best interests of the child and how that concept is understood in Taiwan. Is it your view, when you talk of best interests of the child, in particular within a legislative context, is it your understanding that the concept of the best interests is one that attempts to determine what is the best solution for a given child? Is it one that attempts to determine the best choice among a number of possible solutions that are all in conformity with the rights of the child, and that you use best interests to determine which of those solutions, all of which are potentially in conformity with the rights of the child, but which of those is the most appropriate in this particular situation? Or is it a concept whereby the interests of the child would become more important than the interests of any other party, any other adult, any organization, or even the state itself? Or is it a combination of two of those or all three of those? I think it's extraordinarily important to try to come to, or to try to determine precisely what the meaning of this concept is, to the extent that it is a relatively vague one, and in the context of human rights, it only applies to children. So that's why I wonder if you've given thought to that, and I wonder if you can guide us in terms of the way that your thinking is going in terms of those possible interpretations of the concept. Thank you. Thank you. John?
I have two sets of questions. The first relates to Article 6. We've read that the Indigenous mortality rate for infants is higher than for non-Indigenous children. So my question is, are special measures being taken to address that rate of mortality amongst young Indigenous children? The second question in relation to Article 6 concerns accidental deaths and suicide. We've read the statistics in relation to suicide have slightly increased in recent years. And are there measures being taken to undertake inquiries to determine the causes of those deaths so we can prevent them in the future? The other question relates to Article 12, and particularly the ability of children to express their views in court proceedings. I'm keen to hear from perhaps the Judicial Yuan about whether training is provided to judges about how to enable children to express their views in family court proceedings, child protection proceedings, or judicial proceedings involving criminal law, and whether lawyers are appointed to assist young people to express their views in those proceedings as well. Thank you.
Thank you. And there is just one short follow-up question on the legal proceedings and the right of the child to express her or his views. I'd like to know how exactly the child is provided with the opportunity to express her or his views. We can take as an example a divorce procedure and children, and the matter of custody, the matter of contacts. Does the court invite children on a certain day and time to come to the court and express their views? Or is it depending on circumstances, wishes of parents, wishes of lawyers? So my experience is that a lot of countries have very good rules on the right to be heard. But if you come down to the nitty-gritties of the daily practice, often children first don't know that they have a right to express their views and are certainly not invited to come to the court. So if you can give me some specific information on the practical parts of implementing the right to express your views in court. Madam, your turn.
Well, on stateless children, what kind of services or benefits do they have? That's the first question. The second question is children with disabilities in terms of their right to education, whether or not they are abused at institutions. The third question is about data collection. I think our statistics office can offer explanation. There is no sufficient breakdown information based on ethnic background, sexual orientation, and disability. And another question is about the right to life, the data on suicide rates, especially suicide rate in the rural area, as well as the infant child mortality in indigenous communities. And next, the best interest of the child. What guidelines are there? What principles do we have? How do we make sure the best interest of the child is implemented? I think the Judicial Yuan and the Social and Family Affairs Administration can answer the question. The right to express their own views. Again, the child should be deemed as people with full personality, and they have the right to express their own views. Professor Tobin talked about the child mortality rate in indigenous communities. I just touched upon that. The Judicial Yuan can answer the questions raised by Professor Tobin and Professor Duke. For example, in divorce proceedings or the custody cases, how do we make sure children's views are given due weight? So these are the questions I think we have received. Maybe the Social and Family Affairs Administration can start. Thank you all very much for the questions. Regarding stateless children, the services, healthcare services and benefits they can enjoy. According to our Children and Youth Welfare Act, stateless children should be assisted. Relevant laws should be used to provide services and benefits for stateless children when it comes to medical care, vaccination, for example. Before they're registered into the National Health Insurance Scheme, they can receive some medical grants or subsidies to help them to get vaccination. And as long as they stay in Taiwan for over 6 months, they are eligible to receive national health insurance protection. If the stateless child is not properly looked after, we can help with the arrangement for foster family or institutional care. If there are caregivers for the stateless child, then on a case-by-case basis, we can arrange different social welfare services. For example, some economic support. In terms of services and benefits, I don't think there will be a big gap between stateless children and children born with clear nationality. As for children with the disabilities and the percentage of them being abused at institutions, the data did not show that children with disabilities are more prone to be abused. But in all the cases involving abused children, the children with disability has a slightly higher percentage than children without disabilities. I believe we need to conduct more analysis to see what's going on. Special needs of children with disabilities, we still first focus on their families. If they can stay with their family, we will prefer that option. But if that's not viable, we will arrange institutional care or foster care. I think I'll leave it there now. Thank you. Data collection. On this issue, different government authorities are responsible for collecting data related to their functions. So that's how we divide the work. Usually, we can conduct a survey, or there will be registry information that we can use. For social and economic data, for example, the cause of death data, usually we have to gather data based on the registry information. But in that case, there will be no indication of ethnic background or disability, but gender and location information will be included. So this is the restriction of the way how we collect data. In addition, if we conduct a survey, again, it depends on how you design the survey questions. If we want to collect more detailed information on, say, sexual orientation, ethnic background, then we can design them into our questions. So that's the answer from the Statistics Office. I think we need to design more diverse questions. Suicide rate. Especially the rising suicide rate among children. Suicide rate in recent years, indeed, among teenagers, especially those aged between 15 and 18, the suicide rate has been rising. In the statistics on the cause of death, there's no way we can tell why they committed suicide. But we did have some data on suicide attempts. In other words, when the child is sent to the hospital will try to gather information about why he attempted suicide. And it seems that love relations is the dominant factor causing children to adopt suicide or conflict with family members. And the third is about depression. And the fourth factor is relationship with classmates or school performance. So these are some data we have about why teenagers attempted suicide. And again, their activities on social media can be a contributing factor as well. Right now, more budget has been allocated to schools so that they can set up counseling offices. And there are 3-tier prevention program in place. At the MOHW, we are also working closely with schools to prevent suicide. If on the school side, they have identified students with depression, they will refer them to the hospitals and clinics to help them receive treatment. As for the suicide data in the indigenous communities, we have data only until 2013. It's because after 2013, the suicide rate among the indigenous children or community is not among the top 10 groups. Therefore, the Council for Indigenous Peoples stopped collecting data. And indeed, the existing data on suicide is not enough for us to tell why or whether or not why the indigenous peoples committed suicide. It seems that indigenous people do have a bit higher suicide rate. It's about 0.03% higher than the other groups. Social and Family Affairs Administration and the Ministry of Justice and the Judicial Yuan can also help shed light on our understanding of the best interest of the child. Please.
Okay, when it comes to BOIC, best interest of child, I think social workers or other professionals, when deal with children's affairs, we have to look at the overall environment of the children, the family, the issues themselves, and then to conduct a comprehensive analysis. And of course, the thoughts of the children is very important. It is also stipulated in CRC that we have to hear the children's opinions. So when social workers work with these children, they ask about what children think. And children have less resources than adults. So that's a factor we have to consider. And I think we have to consider the age, the family, the school, the issue a child is facing. And then also consider the thoughts of the child, and we make the best decision with the child. And that's what I think BOIC is. Thank you. Judicial Yuan, do you have any views on best interest of child? Well, I think when judges address cases, we consider the Civil Code on Article 1055, that is the sex of the child, the age of the child, and the number of the siblings of the child. Do they have brothers and sisters? How many there are? And we also consider the health situation of the child. As for children's opinions, it is possible that children have some subjective opinions that they want to express, and the courts will use appropriate channels to understand these thoughts of children. The developmental stage of the child, the stakeholders in this case, such as parents or grandparents or other family members who live together in the family, such as their uncles and their aunts, and these people's age, economical situation, and characters. These are all of the things that judges will consider to guarantee the best interest of child. And in divorce cases, we will investigate whether a certain parent wants to truly take care of the child. We'll also look at whether one parent is influencing the other parents in how they educate the child. If the two parents are not living together, is one party friendly with the other? The courts would consider children from different cultural groups, because when they're from different ethnic groups or cultural groups, there have to be some differences between children. So we would that's all the issues that we considered when we consider best interest of child. How about in judges training? In judges training, best interest of child and elements in the training, and learn to how to communicate with the children. Okay, next, well, on behalf of the Judicial Yuan, I would like to talk about how children's rights are protected in courts or in legal proceedings. Well, if it's a family case, when we deal with cases that are associated with children, courts respect children's right to express themselves. During the legal proceedings, if children are present, we will directly ask the children what's their thoughts on a particular matter. Additionally, to protect children's rights, we have a confidential court. That is, the legal proceedings are not made public, and we also try to establish a friendly court environment. When we ask opinions of children, we don't conduct the proceedings in normal courts. We go to a separate court, which is more cozy and comfortable. There are puppets, there are illustration books. Children can draw, paint, and play with stuffed animals so that they're less anxious. If it is necessary, we'll also ask social workers to be there. If it is necessary, then there will be separated investigation. If it is a domestic violence case, and family affair investigator will help investigate cases related to children. We also have psychologists, clinical psychologists, or counselors. They are asked to help to accompany the children when necessary, so they can accompany children in the legal proceedings and help children to express their opinions. And the social and welfare institutions may visit the children, whereas other professionals, such as teachers, if children and youth think it's necessary for the teachers to accompany them, then teachers are allowed to be with the children in the court. As for Juvenile Delinquency Act, when juvenile cases are addressed, the courts respect the youth's right to express their opinions, and judges tell the youth that they can't choose their assistant to help express the opinions on their behalf, and they have the right to such legal assistance or legal representation. If in the process of the legal proceedings, the judge believes that it is necessary to have a professional to help ask the questions of the youth, then according to Juvenile Delinquent Act, there is a professional juvenile investigator to help ask questions. Next, moving on to the training for judges. Every year at Judges Academy, we organize training on CRC, on BOIC, on the protection of the right of children, and on the skills to investigate children's cases and how to ask questions of children. Each judge has to go over more than 12 hours of training on inquiry skills. And this training has been ongoing for many, many years. Thank you. On best interest of child and on the right to expression, I think Professor Kopp mentioned a child between 18 and 20 who are married. They have the legal capacities and they can deal with their properties. And does these meet the best interest of child? Maybe some representative from MOJ can respond to this inquiry. Or you need more time to think about it? Maybe share your views on this question. Okay, we can have 1 more minute to prepare for the answer. Let's move on from best interest of child to right to expressions. So in schools, schools may have some disciplinary actions against children. Do children have the right to express their opinions about those actions? Hi, I'm from MOE, Ministry of Education. Well, generally speaking, in elementary and junior high schools, children can elect little mayor, which I mentioned earlier, or there are students' associations too. Through such structures, children are able to express their opinions regarding what improvement they want to see, what they want the schools to make, what facilities they want, what environments they want on campus. So students can make their opinions expressed. So this is their active way of providing their opinions. Well, in a more passive manner, there's the 113 hotline. If students are bullied or abused, they can call this 113 hotline. If students go to the factories and have a cooperation, a contract with their schools, they go to the factories and work there, but they don't think they are treated properly, then they can file a complaint. As for disciplinary actions, if students feel that their rights are violated under these actions, they can submit complaints to the review committee in school. So students can submit such a complaint to the review committee in the school. And if the students are not happy with the decision made by this committee, then these students can make appeal to the local government. So this is how students can express their thoughts and opinions. And in High School Education Act, Article 15 stipulates that children are representatives in school affairs meetings. So children can join school affairs meetings that decide important school matters. And in recent years, we are reviewing the 2019 new curriculum for students. So from the 1st grade to the 12th grade, the content of the classes are all governed by this curriculum. And in the curriculum meetings, students can join as well. Students can register to enroll in the meetings, and they can also enroll themselves as the candidate. In the curriculum meetings, there are NGO representatives and also children representatives. And out of the 48 meeting members, 4 are students representatives. So they do have a say to let us know what they want to learn in the curriculum. And also in the new curriculum, it is stipulated that when the curriculum committee is having meetings, there have to be student representatives. So this is a way for children, for students to express their thoughts in policies or teachings that are related to them. Okay, let's go to the questions on discrimination. First of all, we heard that indigenous people's mortality rate is higher than other ethnic groups. Are there any measures to improve that? And second question, in rural area, how do we utilize better resources to care for the health? So any representative from the National Health Promotion Administration? And how can we help children in rural areas not discriminated against? And I think these questions can be answered by the Health Promotion Administration and the Statistical Office. Thank you. Okay, when it comes to infant mortality, the major cause is congenital or some abnormalities in pregnancy or accidents. And in cities where the indigenous people have higher mortality rates, we have a special program for high-risk pregnant women. So we care for the pregnant women when they were pregnant all the way till the child is born and becomes 6 months old. And as for premature babies, their mortality is also higher than other infants. So there is a special program for premature infants. We care for these infants all the way till they are 2 years old. As for accidents, which is a major cause of death of infants, we teach the schools or the preschools and the parents or other primary caretakers to evaluate the environments the infant lives in. Doctors, nurses also help us to teach the parents and the caretakers. And another kind of accident is traffic accidents. So we work with the Ministry of Transportation. And in areas where the indigenous infants has a higher mortality rate, we have a special program to promote safe indigenous communities. And in indigenous communities, people who use tobacco or people who smoke, well, there are more people like that compared to other areas. So we try to promote or raise awareness of health in those areas. And reducing the mortality rate of infants is one of our important KPIs now. And in the indigenous areas, if children are sick, then we have special grants and subsidies to help those areas and remote areas as well. Thank you.
Okay, so the gap between the rural and urban areas, the Ministry of Education does allocate different budgets for these two regions. For example, we would provide more subsidies and grants to help rural schools to improve their infrastructure, facilities, and invest in parenting education. There will be more budget or grants for counselors at rural schools. In addition, for the overall improvement of the rural region, the Ministry of Education is now drafting a guideline for education in the rural area, from funding to more flexibility in the qualification of principals of schools and teachers at rural schools. For example, the compensation package may be better for teachers and principals at the rural schools. So this can serve as better incentives to make sure teachers can stay in rural schools. The children can also have better learning retention. As for the lunch meals at rural schools, the cost of preparing such lunch meals at the rural area is higher. Therefore, the ministry will offer higher salary to the kitchen workers at the rural schools, and more grants and subsidies are offered to these rural schools. And the ministry also offers tuition subsidies for indigenous students if they want to enter universities. And there are also sort of like affirmative action programs in place. And if the indigenous student shows sufficient proficiency in his ethnic languages, he will get extra credits or points in his entrance examination. So these are different incentives to help indigenous and rural students to have the same chances in entering higher education institutions. Thank you. Good morning. I think in our report, we already spelled out the budgets from different government agencies for children. And the MOHW, the MOE representatives also explained what consideration they had in allocating budgets for children studying at the rural areas. These considerations are made in order to bridge the gap between the rural and the urban areas. Moreover, other agencies and ministries are doing similar things. For example, the Council of Indigenous Peoples has many special programs for indigenous peoples. Maybe the Council can provide additional information later. Thank you. Social and Family Affairs Administration. Maybe you can provide you can provide additional information. For example, how medical care services are provided at rural areas. And yes, the Council of Indigenous Peoples, please also offer additional explanation what you have done to safeguard the rights of children. So the question is about the gap between the urban and the rural areas. For remote areas, we do have different requirements for self-financing. Local governments in the remote areas can have lower self-financing ratio for their programs. So the central government offers more budget for the remote areas. This is an attempt to narrow the gap between the rural and the urban areas. As for expense subsidies, for example, medical subsidies and other types of subsidies, we do take into account such a gap. Regarding medical care in the rural area, we have two strategies that are ongoing. The first one is through the government's budget, each city and county in Taiwan will have pediatric pediatricians offering 24/7 medical care for children. In other words, the government's budget is used to make sure that children in the rural area have access to pediatricians services. The other strategy is about training physicians with government's scholarship. If after they graduate, they will have to serve in the remote areas for a period of time. IDS, this is a project governed by the National Health Insurance Administration under the MOHW. The IOS is an attempt to integrate healthcare resources in different regions. Pediatrician services, of course, will be part of it, but they are also eye doctors, skin doctors, dermatologists. In other words, physicians will be sent from major hospitals to serve in the rural areas. That's the IDS. Moreover, again, through government's budget allocation, big hospitals in the city can send or dispatch their physicians to work in the remote areas. The Council of Indigenous Peoples, thank you for the questions. Again, on the gap between the rural and urban areas. Yes, the gap is there. For example, the transportation infrastructure, there are also gaps among different ethnic groups. We have 30 indigenous communities, and in fact, 46% of them have moved to the urban area. And based on our studies, basically, we gather data from different government agencies, and we can compare the data relating to indigenous communities in the mountain areas vis-a-vis those in the city. And based on the data in 2013, for every 100,000 people in the indigenous people in the mountain area, the infant mortality is 910. For those indigenous communities in the city, it's 859. So you can see the number in the other ethnic groups in the city area. Actually, there are indigenous communities in the mountain area, in the plains area, and in the city. So the gap between the infant mortality is quite apparent. So the indigenous communities in the mountain area does have shortage of healthcare resources. That is why we have allocated more resources to help the indigenous communities in the mountain areas. For example, we have been expanding the healthcare stations in those regions, and there are more subsidies for the national health insurance premium. For those aged under 19, there are about 31,000 indigenous children in these communities, so we do allocate more resources and funding. So for infant mortality higher regions, we try to implement IDA's programs and other special programs to reduce the mortality rate. And the Ministry of Education is also training more indigenous students to become doctors who can then come back to their communities to serve. We have been making these efforts. There's a question that requires further elaboration. That is, do we in Taiwan truly understand the meaning of the best interest of the child? Do we choose the solution that is in the best interest of the child, or do we allow the child to make the decision that he deems to be in the best interest? Okay, Social and Family Affairs Administration. I will try to compile opinions from different agencies. In fact, in the CRC, legally speaking, the idea of the best interest can be a little bit vague. Depending on individual cases, we may have different considerations. For example, the age, the way he is being looked after, the difficulties or problems the child is facing now. We need to see things from the child's eyes to make sure that the child stays healthy and stays in the best shape. Therefore, I believe best interest may vary depending on individual child's situation. But of course, this is the ultimate principle in the CRC in Taiwan. As we have made the CRC provisions part of our domestic law, we will spare no effort to implement the principle of the best interests. So for all professionals in rendering services to the child must receive training about the best interest of the child principle. Thank you. Maybe I can provide additional some information. We can look at the best interests from two perspectives. The first, in a proactive sense, we do everything we can to seek the best interest of the child. In a more passive sense, we try to reduce harm, any potential harm to the child's best interest. I think that can be a way to look at the best interest of the child. I would like to hear advice from the committee members too. Okay, the department, that's the representative from the Department of Protective Services. I think we have answered most of the questions. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Well, we are 5 past midday. Are there follow-up questions? Okay. We may not answer your follow-up questions, but you have then 2 hours to think about an answer to the follow-up questions. Mrs. Karp.
You need to give me. How is the best interest of the child reflected in the fact that adopters can one-sidedly decide not to continue with the relationship of adoptions? So the adoptee, who have been going through procedures to decide on the adoption, is left without, it seems that his best interests are not considered in this case. With regard to the questions of different allocations of budgets to the remote area, the question is whether I understand there is a plan to close the gap within some years. I wonder if there is a monitoring process to know how these special subsidies or allocations of budget are really used or are effective. I understand that in the remote areas there is a problem of, due to, I think, budget consideration, schools are closed and children have to live in dormitories in order to be able to participate in the joint schools that are opened after closing the small schools. And I read complaints that the life in the dormitories are, that there the children are, have problems of, they may even be abused or, my question is, what is the monitoring system of life in these educational dormitories? I understand that also there is a problem of transportation to schools in the remote area and what is being done to ease the problem. And mainly I would like to refer to the question of substitute teachers again. I understand that the plan is to promote programs to better the salary of teachers so that they have motivation to work in the remote area. But what is the actual program to close the gap between professional teachers, steady teachers, and the existing situation of, let's say, non-professional teachers? With regard to complaints, again, I understand that every local administration can decide on the rules of appeals on complaints. And my question is whether it's not a matter of national procedures to be decided for all children in all schools, in all regions, and in all local administration. So it's not decided, there may be gaps in the procedures of appeals on decision in the education system. And my last question is with regard to budget to teaching mother language of indigenous people. I understand that the study is decreasing the opportunities to study mother language. And what are the plans to have more opportunities and more incentive for children to study their mother language? Thank you.
Yes.
Just one set of brief questions on children with disabilities who are in residential care. Thank you very much for the information on that. If I understand the information correctly, the number of children with disabilities in living in residential care is increasing in the last 5 years. And I would be interested in an explanation as to why it is increasing rather than decreasing, which would be in line with the convention. I forgive my pronunciation, but it seemed to me the city, someone can tell me how to pronounce it, is it Kaohsiung City? Kaohsiung, one of the cities, it's the second biggest city after Taipei. How do you pronounce that? Kaohsiung. It seems to have a very large number of residential care institutes for a much smaller population than Taipei, and I'm curious as to why it would have more residential care institutes and many more children in residential care, including 9 children under the age of 6. Thank you.
Thank you. John?
Thank you. Just a few quick follow-up questions. First, on the issue of attempted suicide and the data, we were told that one of the reasons is failed love relations. Are we able to identify whether those relationships are heterosexual or if they involve young people identify as being gay, lesbian, bisexual or transgender? The second question goes to the issue of a child's best interests, and the representative from the Department of Social Affairs listed a number of factors and talked about a comprehensive analysis. My question is, do you have official guidelines that actually inform decision making, or is it on a case-by-case basis depending on the worker? So are there written down guidelines to inform those decisions? A related question goes to our colleague from Little Yuan. You referred to Article 1055 of the Civil Code and listed a number of reasons. I'm wondering if we get a translation of that particular provision to see what factors are included in the assessment of a child's best interests. And then lastly, we heard that a number of actors are involved in assisting children to express their views: teachers, family workers, and sometimes lawyers. Do those people actually receive specialist training as well about the Convention on the Rights of the Child? Thank you.
Okay, there's the follow-up question. There's one on stateless children. If I understood the information in your report well, stateless children can get the Taiwanese nationality if they are adopted. If they are not adopted, what I understood is they can apply for citizenship of Taiwan after 18. So the question is, why do you not allow the obtaining of the citizenship of Taiwan for children? Let's say the children are adopted. Well, the current practice in most countries is that usually young children, so let's assume that somebody is 8, 9, or 10 as a stateless child and has to, if he can stay in Taiwan, be stateless for a long time. And although stateless children do get some services, it's certainly hindering the development of the child due to the stateless status of the child. So, question, how can a child that is not adopted obtain citizenship of Taiwan before the age of 18? The second question is about an information that I became aware of is missing. The children are heard in legal proceedings. The simple question, is there an age limit for hearing children? Or are you, in principle, hearing children regardless their age? So you are hearing children who are lifted out of their little place by their parents and show to you, and you communicate with the child and try to find out what her views are on what happens after divorce of their parents. So I need to know, is there either a formal rule, minimum age for hearing children must be heard, or if it is not, what is the actual practice in hearing children? Because without an age limit, there is a lot of discretion with the judges to hear a child or not to hear a child, because the child has the right to be heard, as you know, if he or she can form her views or opinion. And I'm aware of the fact that there are a lot of judges that have different views on when a child is capable of forming her or his views. So I like an answer to that particular question as well. And as I said, Madam Head of the Delegation, it's lunchtime. So we are going to put an end to this morning session, and we will resume our meeting this afternoon at 2 p.m. Okay, enjoy your lunch, and particularly for all those who are going to work on the answers, don't forget to eat. Meeting is closed.
感谢各位参与上午的会议，我们在场外为您准备了午餐餐盒，欢迎您留在现场享用。 我们将在1点20进行本场次的清场，届时还请您记得携带您的随身物品及归还口译设备。
等一下，次长要说下午谁要回答。
好的，那接下来的时间的话呢，我们会先交由次长进行说明。
这2点哦，早上有好几个问题，待会回来下午就要回答嘛，哈，就是有这儿少最佳利益对收养的这个部分，哈，然后这个是不是待会社家属要来回答嘛，哈，然后再来就是有关于教育部哈，他对于官校这件事情哦，代课老师这件事情，那有没有中央统一的申诉的机制？有没有让教导母语学习的方案？这个 Kobe 讲的4个问题都要教育部来回答哈，就是真正大家知道哈。那这个 Randy 回答的问题就是我们儿少机构的人数上升哦，那为什么像高雄有一些的机构还在不断的在扩张？这么小的孩子9岁以下怎么放在机构里？我想这次社家属要回答。第3个就是Toby 的部分哦，就是刚刚好像没有回答这个亲口师讲的自杀里，没有对于情感，那情感中有没有再进一步分析，是不是跟他的性取向、LGBT 这些有关系？这个要请待会亲口师校友补充哦。那一样，儿少这个最佳利益全面的指导方针哦，民法105之1的规定，这是法务部有没有英文版可以提供？然后这个再讲一次，司法院对于这个儿少的表意权有没有一些的一个受训的部分？然后无国籍的部分能不能取得国籍？内政部如果没有收养，然后这个法院对于这个儿童表意权，他一直在意有没有年龄，有没有不同的操作方式，实务上让他多了解一点点。下午就照这个次序开始就回来，自己有碰到问题的就要回答哈。好，谢谢。
谢谢次长。那感谢各位参与上午的会议。那再次提醒，我们将在1点20进行本场次的清场。那届时会在1点50再次开放下午场次的入场。请各位在清场时，请记得携带您的随身物品及归还口译设备，不要遗留任何的物品在本会场。午餐的餐盒已经为您准备在场外，那请记得去取用，谢谢。